Hi everybody, my name's Ramdas, and through the benefit of this incredible technology, you and I can hang out together, transcending time and space, and reflect together about this extraordinary experiment that you and I are sharing. This experiment of these blossoming service groups that are happening around the country, or the countries, and the service groups represented by you. And we wanted to send you a message so you realize that we haven't forgotten you and that we think a lot about you, because together we are being part of something that is very catalytic in the culture, trying to expand the depth of compassionate action and the breadth of it in the society. And how Seva got into this experiment is perhaps worth looking at in order to understand where we go from here, because there were a variety of factors really that came together to put us into this situation. Part of it was that it became apparent to a lot of us as we got into Seva, that we were really just a little tiny reflection of a very large desire in the heart of people in Canada and the United States to play a part in serving their fellow human beings. And there was a lot of blockage somewhere along the way in just how to do it and how to get on with it. Wavy Gravy and I, both of whom travel around the United States a great deal, both felt a tremendous ripeness in people in this country and in Canada to do something, and they weren't quite sure what to do or how to get going in it. And the letters that started to pour in as Seva became visible as an institution, the repetitive question was, how can I help? How can I join? What can I do? Can I become part of your group? Well, we were faced with a funny predicament, because Seva itself is not labor intensive. I mean, when we do a project, say in Nepal, the whole game is to empower the Nepalese, is to be a handmaiden to them, not to bring in a lot of our volunteers, but to help the Nepalese become the people that do the project. So we haven't really had opportunities to take a lot of volunteers and find places for them. And this was beginning to be frustrating to us, because if you become an organization that's very beautiful and you're getting tremendous joy out of it, and then you find that it's causing suffering to other people because they look and they're jealous, it's like they want to paint the fence too, but you're holding onto the paintbrush. And what you got to do is find other fences for them to paint is really what you have to do, or do something to help out. And one of the things we did was Paul Gorman and I wrote this book, How Can I Help?, which came out of the Seva Foundation, which was really saying to people, let us give you the information we have that we work with, and maybe that'll help you get going, or help you not burn out once you get going. In Canada, Alan Marinas and Bev Spring, who were members of the Seva board, were very interested in building a Canadian structure, but they wanted to approach it from a more grassroots point of view. And they drew together a lot of local people and started to work on a project together, which turned out to be our first Spirit of Service conference that was incredible. It was just incredible. It re-inspired and reinvested so much, and it just showed how healthy compassionate action was in any little subculture. And that conference was just brilliant. And what spun off from that conference was all the people that did the conference together got so juiced working together that they then wanted to keep working together. And that started what was the Vancouver group, which also led to the national and so on. Now, so there was that kind of grassroots influence. The other part of it was that for most of us, working in the foundation was showing us that that the collective wisdom of all of us was greater than our individual wisdom, that the places that each of us were stuck could be helped by being a member of a group in which other people had strengths where we lacked them, and that it was a hell of a lot of fun to work together, to do service, to help relieve suffering. And we started to have so much fun at it, and our friends started to notice that we were having so much fun. And then they wanted to have fun. And the question was, how could we help other people to enjoy the game of working together in a really open, collaborative way to play a game together around service so that they would grow and have fun doing it? Because Wavy insisted we have fun doing it, which was very important, I think, for all of us. Now, the problem was that if we just kept bringing everybody into Seva, Seva would get bigger and bigger. And I think you probably know as well as I do that bigness in organizations changes the quality of it. And we really felt that just getting to know our group and getting to know each other with trust and with truth and with some kind of hearing each other deeply enough is not an easy task, and it took some effort and juice. And we realized that if we just doubled the size or quadrupled the size, we would probably blow the whole scene. So we considered setting up other groups. Then the question was, would they be Seva groups or not? Would we clone and proliferate? Were we going to have McSavas in every city, something like that? And that was a tricky position because if we started to be responsible for many, many groups, we were in a funny position of having to start to be like policemen. We had to be in some role where we were making sure that some group was not doing a project that would blow the whole scene for Seva. And we didn't really want to be in that relationship with our friends. We didn't really want to be in a policing role. And so we decided not to have these be Seva groups, but to have them be service groups. And we just wanted to help other groups start and help enrich them. And we would give you whatever help we could give you. And then, in effect, you as a group would be on your own. And you'd be just like us. And you'd get the fun out of it, and you'd grow, and so on. Now, when I went around the country on a speaking tour and asked people if they'd like to be part of a group in their local area, and most of you remember that, I suspect, the lists were really long. And then we started with, in some cases, 200-300 names. And then by the time a meeting was called, it reduced. And then by the time the second meeting was called, it reduced. And it got down to you. And it got down to small groups of people who really wanted to start to work on themselves and to do a service action. The thing that I've noticed is that there have been some wonderful dramas in terms of these groups as to what has happened with them. But I want to reflect a little bit about one thing about my own involvement with Seva that's relevant here, about projects. When I joined Seva, the original project was the Nepal Blindness Project. And basically, I had nothing going with the Nepal Blindness Project. I was not in international health. I mean, if you listed all the things I was interested in Amnesty International and Oxfam and the whales and the starving children in Africa and things like that. Four Corners and a lot of things like that. But blindness wasn't like the top thing on my list. But it turned out that Nicole Grasset, who was like this dynamo in our organization, she wanted to work on blindness. And so I kind of went along with it without having a great personal, wild commitment for it. And for the first few years, I raised a little money, but I mainly laid back because I felt like a little in over my head. It wasn't my game. And here, part of the board were epidemiologists and international health workers and so on. Here it was, we started in 78, Christmas 78. By 85 and 86, it only took 5-6 years, when in our rotating board thing, I became chairperson of the board. And I found myself in Nepal as a chairman dealing with problems of clinics, of ophthalmic assistance, of supplies, of budgets, I mean, I was forced to grow so fast by this organization because I was somebody who is a professional beer. I want to make sure it all feels good every moment. And we had some really knockdown, drag-out battles in, as you probably already have heard, in Seva, between the beers and the doers. Because the doers say, look, let's just get the job done, and the hell with how you feel about it. And the beers say, let's feel good. Don't rush to act, because if you act too soon, you might create suffering. And I've been a beer all my life. And then there were the doers, and I had to learn a lot to integrate those two things, because really, for us to be free as human beings, we have to be free in form. For us to be free in form, we've got to be really impeccable doers, and at the same moment be resting in our being. It's just a very fine art form. And I'm learning, I mean, the people in Seva are just incredible teachers. They are really tough teachers, and I love it. And I hope you're having the same thing. I hope the people in your group are incredible teachers for you. And they're giving you a chance to see where all your blind spots, all your weak spots are. And I'm suggesting to you that it doesn't matter so much that the project be the project in terms of your deepest desires. That just any project that a group does together that relieves suffering somewhere in the world. I mean, there's so much suffering in the world. Who's to say which is the worst suffering? I mean, is a mother who's never seen her child because she's blind, how do you compare that suffering with somebody homeless on the streets in your city? I mean, or kids that have dropped out of school and that are confused. I mean, you just can't say, well, this is the most important suffering. And when you realize that it's all just a sea of it, you just dive into the sea, and wherever your heart grabs, you do. And sometimes it's the heart of a friend that grabs, and you do. So my suggestion is that it's like pick a project. Pick a project and then just juice it up with your heart and watch the way it involves you. And I guess that's one other thing I want to talk about, which is the level of involvement. That maybe I'm getting old now, and so it's changing, but I'm really less and less willing to be part of groups that are very superficial. Groups that just sort of come to, I've been on boards where you come together twice a year and you meet for a few hours and you sort of rubber stamp everything and you say, hello, how are you? Nice. Oh yes, we're all against sin, and then you go home, have a few drinks and leave. And that bores the hell out of me. I just don't want to play anymore. And it seems to me, if I'm going to spend my time in a group, I want it to be living truth. And I want it to be such that you and I, if we're in a group together, can be straight with each other, can risk opening to each other, so that the dynamics of our being together can allow us to grow through the process of being together. I think a meeting of your group should be as exciting for you as anything else going in your life, and if it isn't, you should scream like hell, and you should demand that it be. I don't think it's nice just to come together and have a muffin and a cup of tea and wave and say, aren't we all against sin, and let's do a nice thing, and we'll paint a homeless shelter, and that's it. I don't think so. I think the whole thing is a piece. And the way in which you meet, the way in which you are with each other, the way in which you are with the people you're serving, all of it is family, family, family. It's all these extended degrees of family. And I just want to hang out with a family that I can, if I had hair, I'd let it down. That I can let my hair down, I can soften, I can just be open. We can all hang out and show our stuff. Get angry, get furious, get in love, whatever it is. This is the family of humanity, and I want to dive into it and swim, and I think you do too. What being part of Seva has done for me is, besides draw out of me a lot of truth and force me to deal with places that I'm weak in, it has engaged me with the broader human condition in a very direct way. And it has started to teach me things like patience and persistence in dealing with projects where the suffering just doesn't go away just like that. Things where you have to stay in tight. And also impeccability, that, you know, when you're working alone, you can be a little sloppy around the edges, but when you're working with other people, you've really got to be clean in the way you play your game about money, about time, about commitments and contracts. And I've really been learning a lot about that, and I feel that Seva has been very much a part of my growth. You notice I focus on personal growth because I see that unless these groups are serving us to help us grow, we're going to burn out on them. You can only do good for so long before somebody else's suffering finally gets so overwhelming that you go like that. But if the process of serving somebody else is also serving your own growth and making you stronger, clearer, more impeccable, more loving, more present, it's wonderful. And the other part that is more fun and more joyful and more playful. We have, in our Seva board meetings, we have a word which I am very reticent to even mention. It's called the S word, and if anybody uses it, I'll tell you the word is, I'm not going to say, quote, serious. If anybody uses the word serious, they immediately have to put on these glasses that Wavy has provided for us. And it sort of keeps us from taking ourselves too seriously. And most of us are very careful never to get caught using that word. Now, you are part of a proliferation of groups that has happened over the past couple of years. And it feels like this experiment is an extremely living truth. But to hear some of the specifics so you will appreciate just what kind of a family you're part of, I want you to now join me in talking with somebody who you know very well, Shams Karas, who is, after all, the guy who has been holding together this whole project. Shams, we're not going to take it seriously. We're going to take it lightly. I've instructed you.
Well, you're the one who said it.
No word serious.
I think your presentation has been very
all right, now let's have a
sincere.
responsible conversation.
So, hi, friends.
Shams has been sort of tracking the whole process of what's been happening to all the different groups. And I think you should hear just what's been going on. Let's start with what the groups have been doing.
Well, a wide range. You all know that I've been in touch with the contact people for all the active groups in the last few weeks, and we've just got a kind of torrent of little projects that sometimes were just one-time projects, sometimes involved an ongoing commitment over a series of months, but almost every group has tried its hand and found there in that project work some material to enrich the conversation and work with each other in the groups. I don't know if I want to just throw them out before you, but working with the homeless, working with in a boys camp for kids who are in probation, working in feeding people in the Turning Point shelter in Santa Monica, working with AIDS patients in a number of settings. The groups are probing into their own communities and finding where it hurts and where it's close enough to them that they can do some healing balm and apply that to their own communities and bring that home, bring that experience home to the group.
Is it all local community stuff?
So far, all local community involvement.
Haven't they done anything connected with the international projects at all?
Well, some groups are doing ophthalmic supply collection, which is, of course, centered locally, but it has ramifications for Seva's programs abroad, collecting and processing, inventorying, and packaging the ophthalmic supplies that go from this country to our programs abroad.
What about, are all the groups doing projects?
No, not all the groups. Some are still essentially support groups for each other, and their work is entirely in supporting each other in what they are doing. They see that in some cases as a project, but it's not project work that takes them outside the group. Many of the people in the ongoing groups are very active already in project work. And some of the groups have taken on a unique approach, which is they all support each person individually in the project work that they're doing. And so one month they may all get behind somebody's personal project and help juice that, and then next month they'll do that for another member.
So the groups are still serving in two ways. One is support for people in the group who are busy serving. And whether they directly support it or they're just sort of talking and sharing what's going on in their lives. And the other is the groups are getting together to do a project.
Right.
And both of those seem valuable to me.
They seem valuable to the groups too. I think the place where some of the groups feel stuck is where they've not found a way to focus their energy. They feel some inner call to do some project work together. They've not found a way to identify that project. And I think sometimes the case is that they feel that the way to proceed is to find the thing that everyone can do together.
God, you could wait till hell freezes over for that to happen, sure.
Right.
Because the group comes together with so many different backgrounds and preferences.
Right. There's been a number of creative solutions. One is the one that you talked about in your relation to Nepal. You bend to what is on the plate and you find their sustenance. You find a way to grow with that. The other is that some of the groups have done a very creative solution. Those people who are moved to do a certain thing do it, and they bring back what they have gotten from that engagement to the group, and so it enriches everyone, even though not everyone is doing it.
Yeah. When people ask me, I say, just go get any project and do it for a little while as a group, and then come back and talk about it, and they'll grow, and then they'll be able to figure out a project. I mean, I think in the future we're sort of thinking a little differently about how we would see groups. You want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
well, in fact, when we were first talking about this taping, I was mentioning this experiment as a kind of probe, a space probe. Never quite saw that image. But you are in effect, a space probe sent off from the spirit of Seva into the unknown. And there's been enormous thrust, and it has pressed some of you back into your seats. There's been the dropping of the booster rocket, and many of the groups have shed a lot of the membership. And I haven't quite got a clear feeling of how joyful, painful, where on that spectrum that shedding process has been. But most of the space crews now number 5 to 15, something like that, catapulting out there and sending signals back, and we're doing our best to interpret them. But what we sense is that since the place that most of the groups feel stuck, if they do feel stuck, is in finding a project focus, that in the next wave of experimentation, what we ought to do is create a programmatic approach to developing groups around project work. And
in other words, help help a new group get into a project initially to get some learning and feedback from it, even if it's not their final project, just as a practice project. So.
Right. Because all the groups are all the time going to be processing material. Why not process the material of what they're doing together when they go out, let's say, on a volunteer foray to the local shelter and deal with that experience? Gosh, that person really, I felt so close when he came down the line to me, but when he said thank you, something happened in my heart, and that's what you get to work with in the group.
Of course, it's interesting because that structure, when we start to give more structure to new groups, it's a little more authoritarian. We're saying you should do it this way, this way. We're doing training programs and stuff like that. And part of our whole style is not to be that way with other human beings. And so within our group, we have a lot of differences as to how to proceed at this point.
Yeah, I think it's risky, and there's gains and losses, and it's not ironed out by any means yet. In fact, that's part of what we're doing right now, is trying to see the way to proceed without excluding too many of those who are interested in coming into this kind of work.
Be interesting to know, I mean, I think we want to follow up a lot of the people that dropped out of some of these groups along the way to find out. You've done some of that, haven't you?
Yeah, but we need to do more research in that regard. Usually what I'm talking to in the contact person is someone who's consistently there with the group and engaged in it.
The yay
So
sayers.
we get kind of, when I ask for an impressionistic reply about what is the state of health of the group, we get strong, ripe, very healthy, very sound, that kind of response. And of course that's true for that core group that has really made it through that shedding process. But we do need to know more about the people who we've sort of left along the way. I think some of them are not necessarily failures. Even the groups that haven't made it, and there are a number of them, who have dissipated over time. They had a short half-life, some valuable things came out of it, but they didn't find the way to focus their energies and stay together at the same time. The process just didn't congeal.
Would you read the list of the cities that we have groups in? I just think it's fun for everybody to hear how broad the game is.
We happen to have it alphabetical now.
Yeah, it's just the beginning of the game.
So in Albany, people are meeting, Ann Arbor, Atlanta, Baltimore, 2 groups in Boston, Chapel Hill, Detroit,
That's North Carolina.
Right?
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale, Kansas City, 3 groups in Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Montclair, New Jersey, Montreal, New York City, Portland, Salem, Oregon, Salt Lake City, 2 groups in the San Francisco area, Santa Cruz, 2 groups in Seattle, Tampa, Florida, and certainly, I don't know if I mentioned...
of course, there's the old groups in Canada, Toronto.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, Toronto and Vancouver.
And Victoria.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So 25 or 30 groups now working together in a consistent way.
So you can feel that this experiment, which is just going out like this, one of the things that we're just we need your feedback, and we need to figure out how to play together to make this work, is how to provide from Seva, from our place, enough structure to leave people so they don't wallow, because a lot of people drop out because of the wallowy nature of the groups at the beginning. And we were just giving everybody a little support, and then they were on their own, and the wallowiness kind of discouraged some people. But we don't want to get so authoritarian that people don't feel the space to be creative. So we're going to have to learn the fine line and need feedback from groups in the next round together.
Yeah. And I think Ramdas's comments point to something very important for you to know, which is that we in Seva are really struggling with these issues. It's not a clearly defined kind of thing. Our process very much mirrors what's happening with you all as we explore and probe out into the future development of this kind of work.
The other thing that we've been playing with is that the relationship among the groups seems to us that that it shouldn't all be the star pattern where it all feeds back into a central office. And we hope, for example, we're going to have a Spirit of Service conference in LA coming up in the spring that's being sponsored by the local groups there. And we hope that will be, and there'll be an invitation there for representatives from your group to come and meet representatives from other groups and start a networking, and perhaps there'll be some kind of a newsletter or some kind of a communication process. Isn't that the...
Well, there have been a couple of experiments in that line of groups trying to interface with each other. Certainly in the cities where there's been more than one group, that's been most readily available. But yes, these kind of forums, using the conferences that we're setting up as forums, trying to use the newsletter, I'm sure you've noticed, as a forum for communication of what's happening in the groups, really enriches. I find that people really enjoy and feed off of that input from each other.
And Wavy said hopefully he's going to come around and visit some of the groups this year.
Right.
And that should...
Right. There's a letter in the mail
them.
that will just outline the very first step of that. But there's a number of things coming your way that we hope will help feed you in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I want to just reiterate that you and us, you and we,
Cousins.
that all of us together are in this soup, that when you can feel that you are part of just a network of serving. Forget who owns it or what name or any of that stuff, but we are part of a network. We're part of a compassionate hand that reaches out, and that you can feel that as we talk to you, that we are all part of something that might be, by the way, much greater than any of the game we're all playing here. This may be a timely moment in history when a lot of us are feeling this thing. This may be, a friend, Paul Gorman in New York, said, maybe it's time to dream again. And maybe this is all part of that dream again, that feeling some of us had in the 60s, that we could have that kind of idealistic, that feeling of caring for other human beings and do it and make a difference, and make a little difference. And so that what you're doing in your meetings and what you're doing in your community and what you may be doing in collaboration with us in some of the international projects, just feel that it's just a little part of the fabric of this beautiful, beautiful, this large tapestry of service that we're all growing through. What else you want to say, Sean?
Hear, hear. Let's
Hear.
weave together.
Hear, hear. So you'll hear from Shams again, always.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to call and write in. I really
Call and demand our
appreciate
help
that.
in any way you want. I mean, because we're going to learn from just the way you and I play
Yeah.
together, all of us play together.
Yeah. And I'm in an interesting position to be the interface between what I can glean from you and from what your experience, and from and filter that into Seva's, and then vice versa. So we really are feeding each other, and that's a real part of the richness of that weaving we're doing.
And don't be irresponsible. Remember, this is serious business.
He said.
Much love to you all.